Okay.
Got it.
And the agenda's in the chat.
But thanks. Good.
Yeah.
Well, actually, to be honest, so yeah, welcome everybody. That's the first one. So good to see you all. And I know I've been missing quite a bit in action last couple of months. I've been on vacation, traveling. So therefore, I also don't know what really the status is of this work group. So I think it would be good to do a kind of a refresher where we are. And I know we have some outstanding actions, and I know that Carla has been so kind to be following up together with you, Laura. So maybe it's the best that you could give a refresher where we are. And
yeah, sounds good. So the last, maybe I'll go back to the last 2 meetings that we had, which were a couple months ago. We had met with some of the reimbursement experts at the AMA and had a discussion, really good discussion on sort of giving them some context and education on what digital pathology is, and then exploring, what their recommendations on a route of how to pursue getting a potential code for digital pathology. Their first recommendation was to start to reach out to some of the other relevant medical groups who ultimately we would need to work with in order to garner the support and generate the evidence that we would need to go to the AMA to support establishing a code. The next call that we had, the next and the last call, was just sort of like regrouping after that meeting with the AMA reps. And the general consensus of the group was, well, let's reach out to the radiology groups first, so we can get some idea of how they went about establishing, getting the evidence, working with AMA. And then once we've got some of our background information, we can sort of start to think about a potential pathway and bring in other groups like CAP, who we'll need to be working with if we want to pursue this project. Since then, we've been trying to get a hold of any of the radiology groups. We've reached out to MIDA, to ASTRO, to ASCP, and have had zero luck in establishing contact with any of the radiology groups. I've gotten a couple of responses back saying, I don't know who you would talk to. You should go talk to CAP. And then others have just not responded. So we are now in sort of that, that's where we're at now. We've been unsuccessful in making contact with radiology. So we need to come back and regroup and revise our plan of action. I think potentially, instead of going the radiology route, I have been in touch with some people at CAP who seemed interested in talking. Perhaps that's the next best step, but wanted to bring that to the group, get your thoughts, hear what everybody thinks about that, and we can go from there.
Yeah,
that's the last couple months.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I also think when we had the discussion with AMA, they were really interested, but they really recommended us to go back indeed, right? And that we come up with some proposals ourselves, and they were not really the group to engage with, the persons that we talked with. They were more kind of moderator to help us to accomplish maybe to get reimbursement codes. So that's, yeah, I think we indeed, with this group, and thank you for reaching out to all the radiology groups, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get the feedback that we wanted. But I do think that if CAP is really interested to work with us, that's fantastic, because they did indicate that in the past already, and they had some concerns for good reasons. But if they're interested to work with us, I think we should do that, and probably also, and they're part of the PIcc. So I think that they could join this working group, and then based on that, we could really come up with a good collaborative approach how we want to go to CMS, because they might have more experience than we do. So who did you talk to with CAP, by the way?
I have to double check here.
Oh yeah, okay, it doesn't really matter, but I was just curious.
I don't remember off the top of my head now.
Yeah. So yeah, that sounds like a good approach, because in the beginning we said let's create a blueprint and come up with what do we need to do, what kind of evidence do we need to collect. But I think we first also need to identify what is feasible, how do we want to approach it, and get as much stakeholders involved as possible to make this work. These are my first thoughts. Any other thoughts from someone else?
So do we know, are there any formal sort of radiology approaches to tackle this? Because I think the ROI check on or in radiology is also not as easy as probably portrayed, so because the effort of software development and integration should be the same on the radiology side, right?
I have no clue, and the only thing that we did get from via radiology was that link, right, Laura, from Carla, and it was really focused on not really on the entire, call it enterprise, or the entire solution from scanner all the way to diagnosis, but more only part of it. So it was, from that aspect, it's also broken up in pieces, what I could see.
I mean, one element we could do is probably reach out to the American College of Radiology, right? So, Bib Allen comes to mind. He came to the MDIC meeting. I know that this was a few years back, but he's the chief medical officer of the American College of Radiology. I presume the College of Radiology has probably a reimbursement subsection, and maybe having them join for even just 15 minutes or 30 minutes to just ask them what their sort of formal approach is and what they believe could work. Should we try that?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of that, and that's I think indeed what we tried to do, right?
Oh, what did you say the name was?
Bib Allen.
Okay. I did reach out to someone named Richard Duzak, but received a no longer, the email was no longer, so that might be worth a try.
Yeah.
So if you the link that I just pasted is from the 2019 meeting, and the his email is this.
Okay.
And Joe, I know you have a full plate, but have you had contact with him, and maybe if you just send a quick email introducing Laura and or myself, and then we take it from there, because maybe Bib is more responsive to you than to us.
We'll do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah,
and I think there's also a few other people from ACR that I know, so I will put them on there, and then just for completion, I think I'll CC Jitesh, so that MDIC is involved, just for introduction, and then in case Jitesh has questions, he can come back. But I think that would be.
Yeah.
Yep.
and it's a good approach. So otherwise, we might be walking against the wall again.
I mean, one other option would be to really talk to a payer, right? I don't know if Eric has still some connections, but not necessarily for like a concrete sort of rule or yes or no, but other than, demonstrating long scale clinical utility, which of course every payer will ask for, and, prospective randomized double blinded trials, to just say in absence of that, because this is more or less an adjunct cost, right? So I I followed one Twitter discussion about return on investment in radiology, and some people compared the cost to like who pays for the electronic medical record, right? So, like that's a software that's helping with a lot of things, but it's not necessarily directly reimbursed for.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Eric, if you have some ideas on whether we can get someone to just discuss that, not specific for one payer or so, but just sort of in, or you probably already know, or
Yeah, I think the challenging thing with the payer space is that it's very fragmented, right? So if we're talking about Blue Cross Blue Shield system is where I have the most experience with. If you try to translate that over to like United, Aetna, Cigna, everyone has different systems. So I think the best I could do is maybe find some time for us to speak with maybe one of the medical directors for a local Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, right? Just to kind of get their sense or input on that. So I could probably be able to schedule a connection with one of the medical directors at a local plan. I think that would be a direct way for us overall to kind of engage with a current active medical director.
because I think that would be, even if we say we want to create the evidence, I think, the creation of sort of like highest level data comes at such a high cost that we would need to have either a grant or someone subsidizing it. But there must be other examples on how to demonstrate sort of clinical evidence of a benefit that would be recognized by payers that may not necessarily be through that route. But I mean, it's obviously it has to be non-committal, right? We're looking for someone creative.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that there are potentially, some payers have innovation programs that this could roll up into, but that typically the innovation programs require some sort of, ready to go formulated product that we're trying to get some sort of, innovation coverage for, right? To kind of do that clinical deployment. So the question is, do we have something like that we could bring forth in terms of a innovation program that some payers have as separate arms, right? It's going to be more like strategic innovation versus the bread and butter medical coverage and reimbursement side. So that's an alternative as well, versus that traditional route that you were alluding to earlier, Joe.
And is that something, Eric, that you often see where you have like collaborative approaches? Because most of the time what we see happening is that there will be indeed those lucrative big studies with regards to generating evidence. Now here we're trying to approach it from the different angle indeed. And have you seen that has been done before by collaborative approaches, or is it mostly?
Yeah, it's not typically collaborative, right? It's if we're talking about kind of that innovation arm, there's like certain divisions on the payer side that are looking for newer technologies as a market differentiator for individual health plans. Say, hey, you know what, we're on the cutting edge. We're trying to offer our the members the most cutting edge technology in the context of a quote unquote pilot or innovation program. So those are typically time limited, and you just have to kind of know where to look for some of those opportunities. But in the context of these programs, one needs to have like a particular, it can't be something as general as saying, hey, just digital pathology, right? It's a very specific application that you wish to try to deploy clinically. and then have some way to kind of test, right? It's kind of test and learn and kind of prove that out. But we need to have a specific either hypothesis, specific thing we're trying to test, and then be able to go to a payer with a active, ongoing innovation or pilot program that we could deploy that in.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. If we get a little bit more details on it, then indeed it might be even feasible that we pull this off together. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think going back to my first point, if we want to just speak with a payer, Joe, I know someone local at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, kind of the director for the medical policy program. I could probably ask if we could have maybe in the context of one of these meetings, like a 30-minute time to speak with the medical director, just to kind of get that direct payer input or insight to share with our group here.
I mean, that would be amazing. I think the key element is, of course, to make sure that we set the rules right, that we abstain from actual policy or contracting discussions, or
Yep.
I mean, we want input from a payer, but not about their own payment program. And I think what you just mentioned, it's like the equivalent in industry would probably be the investigator-initiated trial. And here we're looking for sort of these innovation programs. And just to even know why it would fail, other than that there's no policy, right, or that the service has unclear proven value, I think this may be something where we need the expertise of someone outside of pathology, right? Because this is really sort of a service that could be covered if because it's so fundamental to pathology that it may either be rolled up in the general technical fees of pathology, or something more innovative like you outlined. So it would be more of an intellectual or academic challenge for now, but I think what we're looking for is to get additional input to maybe come up with something, because it seems like in a way we're spinning our wheels, right?
Yep.
Joe, I kind of piqued my interest when you were talking about the EHRs and return on investment. I mean, I'm assuming that a lot of the reason why it's worthwhile for hospitals is because they can sell that data to real world vendors. Is there not an interest to real world vendors who are working with drug companies to invest in having maybe digitized pathology reports?
So the digitized pathology reports, I'm sure. Much more challenging is that most, let's call it vendors, probably have an interest in discrete pathology data. Is it cancer? Yes, no. Is it lung cancer? Yes, no. Is it this code? But most of the pathology reports are parsed differently. It's a continuous text, and the imaging data itself, it's just emerging as people recognizing that you can do a lot of other things and you can automate certain components of it. So
it just seems like there's a lot of information from having the digital slide that drug companies.
Indeed. I mean, I know from some of the commercial labs that we work with or that we send out things, a lot of people want to have, for example, a permanent record, right? If you get slides for a second opinion and send them back, to scan them and have them on file. But those are all sort of secondary uses, like they're not like primary, and it's not like a direct service. So I think in a medical record, a lot of the documentation that's going on in the electronic medical record is much more related to medical legal, for medical legal reasons, right? I saw the patient, I documented it, and then the date of service and the billing is part of that. But in a way, sometimes it's also like a no charge encounter, or just to say, hey, I wanted to document this phone screening, or I provided the patient the option of a trial. There's so many things that can be documented and should be documented appropriately. So I mean, we could also talk to one of the medical insurers from a malpractice perspective, right? So maybe that is an angle to explore, like, you know, Crico or one of the other big, you know, vendors of those malpractice insurances, whether there is a need for, I don't know, better documentation and having this slide on, I mean, it's, you know, we sometimes call this the last missing image element of the medical record, right? Which is, it's so critical for every single cancer patient, but it's not present. The primary data is not available, right? So, yeah, but
And to think it's nice. It's a great idea actually, because there also I heard about it, that there also of course there are malpractices practicing doctors, and but we, or any other things that might happen, but do we really want to go into that trajectory compared to reimbursement codes? That's what I'm thinking, because I think you can accomplish a lot there, and it might help payers maybe even just to help them discover those kind of things. But does it really help what we're trying to do for the adoption of digital pathology? But I think it's, don't get me wrong, I think it's a great idea, but it help us to go into the right direction.
I think it could be a secondary objective with the intentions of helping to bolster our primary. You know, I'm just kind of thinking like, you know, the chicken and the egg issue of, you know, insurers want evidence. Well, you have to get paid to develop the evidence. So, you know, are there other ways to help support evidence generation that could then, yeah.
Yeah, that's tough, Laura, because on the payer side, when I was on the payer side, the thing that the other external stakeholders really hated was when payers say we don't pay for research, right? That's kind of the typical response, like, hey, just come back to us when you actually have the evidence. We are here to pay and provide our members or our patients with proven medical technologies, and so like once you're ready, you can come back to us, but it's up to you to generate the evidence. So the only workaround I see around that would be if there's some sort of innovation program where that allows for some sort of earlier partial coverage or reimbursement as the evidence is being developed. The best analogy for this would be kind of the MolDX program, for Palmetto, where you do get provisional coverage. It's coverage with evidence development, but the commercial payers are typically hesitant to try to go down that route because it's much harder to provide some sort of provisional or conditional coverage for like 5 years, and then after 5 years, just take that away, right? Like once you cover something in the marketplace, it's much more difficult to rescind that provisional coverage. That has happened. I mean, I can share with you, it's pretty public, right? CardioDX did get provisional coverage, and then 5 years afterwards, but with confirmatory trials and studies, that provisional coverage was then rescinded. And then I think the following week, the company filed for bankruptcy. So that's kind of the one approach, but that's really difficult because you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket for that approach, and that's just a cautionary tale for what payers can do, right? They really gate what's adopted, because if it's not paid for, the cost burden gets shifted to the patients, and then providers are hesitant to utilize that because they don't want their patients to be stuck with balanced bills or for bills because the insurance companies are not paying for a particular service.
Sure, absolutely. I guess I was thinking of, are there, because with the digital pathology, there's also there's reimbursement for the service. There's also, that high upfront cost of getting the systems going. And I was thinking, are there other interested parties who would benefit from helping with getting those initial costs covered to get it even set up? by selling the data, or, you know, Joe is referencing the medical malpractice, you know, if there's benefits there that could help get the systems implemented, and then you have it, which is one of the big barriers, then you can start generating some evidence. That was just an idea.
Yeah.
I like the idea, but I do like the idea to get just the funding, right? And then we could take a next step. So we could explore this a little bit further. But did we lose someone?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, he mentioned he had to drop off. Yeah. Yeah, so we could do that, but looking at like next steps and priority settings, I think it's worthwhile to first start with your context, Eric, and then also that Joe sets up the new context with the radiology to see if we can learn anything from them. In addition, I do think that it would also be good to have maybe a separate discussion with CAP representatives, just to see what their interests are, their concerns are, and their connections that they already have. Because I think it's good to start creating either our, to complement, to be complementary to each other, but I think we set this collaborative community to also make sure that we can create that synergy. And I think if we can then have that discussion with CAP so that we're all being part of the same community, I think that would really help us also to move. Is there, so the person you spoke to, should we just get into contact with her again and see if she is also willing to join this group and give their perspective maybe?
The CAP, yeah. So at CAP, they would like to have multiple people from their group join who would have expertise. And so then, yeah, if we want to set up a call with them specifically, they're interested in talking to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's like so many people working on this in CAP, it may actually require for us to specify what we're asking them. Because, you know, there's basically from a CAP perspective, you know, there's I think at least 3 committees that tackle this. And so maybe, you know, like a new code is something completely separate from, you know, getting reimbursement changes made, and CMS has, you know, a lot of changes pending. So this may, depending on how we word it, may be misunderstood when it comes to what we're trying to accomplish. So if they hear a new code, that's like a completely different avenue stream. So, you know, the analogy, just what Eric said earlier about, you know, sort of evidence creation in the molecular world, there was a long discussion whether, you know, tiered code should be used for NGS or whether we apply for new codes, and then once the new codes are implemented, can we get reimbursement for those? That was a multi-year discussion that went on in parallel, and now those codes are being revised again to reflect like DNA and RNA sequencing technology, for example. So I see some parallels here, and, you know, maybe to even have a discussion how broad it is what we're trying to ask them about, right? So I don't know, before they may misunderstand that we're what we're trying to accomplish, but
yeah,
Sure,
no,
yeah. So I reached out to, I think her name is Ayana Wooding, who is Economic and Regulatory Affairs for CAP. And when I reached out to her, I specifically indicated that we had been exploring CPT codes for, you know, similar to what was done in radiology for machine learning, digital impact in pathology. So that was what I specifically was inquiring about. Certainly can expand that if we can. Sorry.
And I think it's a valid point because I recall from the past when we were discussing this within the DPA that there were major concerns from the CAP because they really felt also that it could even change the CPT codes as such that the reimbursement would be like reduced even, that they would decrease it because of the more efficiency. So then you will get paid less for the same task. So therefore, I think it would be good that we really have the opportunity to explain it. So if we have the specific question, specific ask, and what we're trying to accomplish, and then also discuss with them what we're trying to accomplish, and if they could support that, that's beneficial. Okay.
I mean, one element I wanted to bring up is also, I don't know how to word this correctly. Let's assume we try all of this and then there comes no check mark on anything, right? So very scientific. Let's work considering that the hypothesis is false and the counter hypothesis is true. One element would be then to bounce it back and say, look, there's no easy way to, add or replace something that is currently existing. So what's the counter hypothesis, right? That would mean that we would have to identify something or throw that back to the whole alliance or PIcc and say, look, what is a use case that cannot be done by a human, meaning, or that you can't do with a traditional microscope that you can do with a whole slide image. And that may require, a little bit of a broader brainstorming. But if we could make a use case for something that cannot be easily, or would not be amenable to like a human and could derive a direct service or clinical service from that, I don't know whether that's another alternative approach to really say, look, this is, maybe there are some QC use cases, right? Or where you parse through data and, sort of like some of those applications have been demonstrated, but I'm not sure whether people have really thought about that as the primary entry point for clinical services.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah. But it is a point that we need to take into account, and but I guess I'm with you on that, Joe. We should take that into account. But did I hear you say that we also do explore this once we hit the wall, right? Once we have that null hypothesis is not rejected. Yeah.
Well, I think there are definitely sort of. Let me just wind back, and I'm looking at it from what Eric said earlier, right? Molecular is kind of a blueprint. So next-gen sequencing, people thought that's a fancy stuff that was largely restricted to research labs. But at some point, it became clear that assessing multiple biomarkers at once can be just accomplished more effectively and comprehensively while doing additional discoveries using next-gen sequencing. I think that was sort of the breaking point where some early adopters used that technology. But, right now, that breaking point, at least from my position, is still an academic one. It's not like you discover new things that then you can find new drugs or there's new biomarkers being identified. So the incentive is a little bit below what NGS has provided, while at the same time people kind of feel that there will be something there and there will be a ton of algorithms there and everyone can do things faster and get clinical decision support and so the benefit seems to be much more dispersed. And that part I can't sort of find a good analogy where, the incremental value is distributed among so many individual things that each one is not really triggering anyone to say, hey, that's it, let's do it. And the the main incentive is that you can if you're interested in, let's say, tumor infiltrating lymphocyte counting, yes, you can do that much faster and more precise, and thereby you can get additional benefits, let's say research, papers, grants. But that by itself will not directly mean financial sustainability from a payer or reimbursement side. So I'm not sure whether that can be somewhat quantified or whether there are other examples of, incremental additional value. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is these combinations. So when individual blood values were combined into CAM7 or CAM10 profiles, to be honest, I don't know how that was before and how that was sort of streamlined into packets of CPT codes. So that may be something to discuss with CAP and, people who are experts on this topic, also across, I don't know, multi-analyte mass spectrometry, how that is accounted for, or flow cytometry. It's like how many biomarkers could be derived from a whole slide image would be an equivalent. But I think what you said earlier, Esther, that CAP may be concerned, about, I mean, it's not only CAP, pathologists may be concerned about that the value created from their routine codes may sink. But I think, we discussed that, when we started putting this work group together, right? If the point is really that whole slide imaging makes you more effective, you can look at more cases per time. Therefore, the value per case could be adjusted, right? But I think that's an elephant in the room that no one wants to address.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe we should clear that first before really driving this, because then I think we can create, then we address it and then we can create more synergy by working together. Also coming back to your point with combining those biomarkers, we all know it's there. We also know that fluorescence is more and more in research, but not yet in clinic. Multiplexing, hyperplexing is in research, but not in clinic. So there are opportunities there, but really addressing them for reimbursement, is maybe early stage, but we could, of course, already start discussing it. What would that do if we are going to accomplish that?
In a way, the versatility of the light microscope is hindering the adoption right now. Because the light microscope, you can do so many things, and that is now being digitized, which can do so many things, but there's no good single use case that you can really parse out. And that almost feels like we're trying to preserve the versatility while we're actually needing one really good use case, and then all the rest is there anyway. And I think that's like very hard to see for pathologists, because the light microscope, you don't want to restrict the functionality of the light microscope. But this is akin to, when the FDA asks for very specific intended use definitions. It is just to narrow it down to one specific thing that you can measure and demonstrate clinical, efficacy and safety. But then there's off-label use, right? So I think in a similar way, the emulation of the light microscope and almost all its versatility now is in the way of identifying the clear-cut use case, and that is like super challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, one way to, consider sort of the value add, and I think, there were like several papers recently, Geolugian put out one, the approaching, value added approaches, etc. So maybe helpful to really bounce this back and ask sort of our membership or CAP, what people are really thinking the one key value proposition is. Just sort of, I don't know, maybe even 2 rounds, asking what people think the value proposition is, and then having folks vote on that, because this seems to be something that individuals can't really solve. There may be, one use case that works for University A or for practice B. I mean, in Canada, like neuropathology frozens have been done. I think there's like several great papers out on that, or remote review, second opinions, etc. But that also didn't seem to catch on in the US. But
yeah, and that's good, and that brings it back to what you said earlier. Could we create code specifically for digital pathology, right? Develop a group code for that, and then the other one is for the microscope still. Yeah, it's tough.
So in terms of like the different branches that we tried, I think it would be really helpful to at least bullet point out the various components, and then maybe we can edit it in the next meeting and just put that on the website, just so people know what we're talking about. And aside from the video, just to have sort of a structured outline. So let's say, Payor, American College of Radiology, CAP, medical legal, I don't know, counter hypothesis accepted, and then work on, finding a different problem solution. Just all these points with what we discussed. Yeah, and then I don't know, Eric, if you have a good contact for a payer, just to really get sort of these more innovative programs, just to do due diligence and talk about everything. And I believe the American College of Radiology will have similar issues, so it may be worth joining them together, because it's both sort of diagnostic disciplines, and I know a lot of the radiology tools are validated against the pathology results, right?
Yep.
So that may create a good incentive to say, for, I don't know if there's an avenue where radiologists say, hey, it would be so good to have those imaging data, for example, to help learn from that, or, but.
Yeah.
I guess my question is for next steps for any payer contacts. I have a couple I can think of. Is would we want to use one of the regularly scheduled meeting times to invite I can think of at least 2 people on the payer side I could probably bring in for that, or is it something scheduled outside of the our monthly or recurring meeting schedule, so I can just do the outreach and then try to get some time with these payer stakeholders.
It's probably easiest if they're available to use one of our recurring times. But if not, we can set up a separate time. I was looking at the same thing for CAP, but I wasn't sure if we wanted to hold off on CAP until we've had the opportunity to talk to the other groups, or do we want to just like go ahead and schedule a call with them? Because I know that they are available the week of they threw out the 14th or the 20th as potential.
October, or yeah.
So maybe having these, at least the bullet points that we discussed, and I mean, because the video is helpful for great documentation and transparency for those who really care, but to have like a brief overview also, so the payer stakeholders can just take a look at what is this issue. To some of the payers, they may not know what whole slide imaging is, and they can Google that, but what are the burning points from a payer strategy perspective, and why are we struggling so much, to just have like a quick bulleted summary so that they know what we will be asking, kind of. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that.
And we could use the presentation and distract from that, right? That we used
Yeah.
when we were so I think we can distract some information from there.
I mean, just to reiterate this is the key question, right? All the rest, like, all the other work groups, and I don't want to, sound like this is the most important. Every group is important, but many of those are just busy or work related or effort related, and that requires funding. But the key question to unlock this, to me is like this financial sustainability, sort of the last step of the translational pipeline. And it's almost astounding that despite so many innovations in the field of digital path, the key use case has not been identified. So, if this would be NIH, we would say, hey, we should put some funding out there to find the key use case, right? So, I mean, maybe worth, discussing that with like the FDA leadership, because they have probably some good communication channels to really say, hey, what is, the key use case from a clinical utility perspective? Because, yeah, just trying every single route, right?
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and that's also why I'm just trying to untangle my brains or something, and because this is so tough. But I think, we have to just take small steps, and I like your idea also to put the bulleted points out there, and I'm happy to work on that with you, Laura, and maybe even use one of these meetings that we already scheduled to work on that whatsoever, because I know everybody has limited time available. And then we can present it in more detail to first one of the persons that Eric has contact with, and then the other one is again then that's the last schedule. I think that we should last group that we should schedule in is then the CAP, and in between hopefully we also can get someone from radiology to learn from.
Okay. All right, I'll hold off on CAP. Eric, I think the next call would be the 20th. So if your contacts are available, then that could be great. Or, any other Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I will reach out to my contacts right after this meeting to see their availability.
Right.
You said the 20th or 21st? I'm looking at my calendar right now just so I could.
The 21st, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yep. So I'll take those as follow-up items, because I do have a contact from the traditional payer medical policy decision side of things, and then one from an innovation program that I will reach out to. So if we can get both their perspectives on the call, that would be great. So potentially, if we want to use the hour, we could split it 30 minutes for each, so that way I'm asking for lesser their time, maybe 30 minutes for kind of that traditional payer coverage, and then 30 minutes for the innovation side of things.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. And Laura, shall you and I then have a call somewhere maybe next week, and then put this bulleted list together, and maybe also prepare a little bit for questions and send that around to the team?
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe we can update the slide that we used with AMA so that when we talk to Eric's contacts.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. So next steps, we're going to get that payer contact. We're going to try to reach out to ACR as well and get meetings with those set up. Esther and I are going to put together an outline, which will then circulate for any additional input that will go on the website. And we'll also use that for our discussion, our subsequent discussions with the groups. And we'll also try to revamp the slide deck to help with those discussions as well. Okay, and Esther, I will circle back with you on to work on the outline.
Should we do the same time next week then, Laura, you and I? Maybe, would that work for you?
That should work fine. Yeah, that works. Okay, I'll just send you an individual meeting then. Okay, great.
Cool. And is there anything else from anyone at the moment? Great. Yeah.
Nope, I think that's it for my side.
And Johanna, I don't know whether you want to say something, but you're muted. Yeah.
I'm muted. For my side, I'm looking forward to that you prepare that list, the bullet point list, because it could be easier for me to just reflect on that and see if I can contribute and comment on that. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll make sure to send it around. Just would love your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I just want to echo Joe, that this is so important indeed, but it's also very difficult. So yeah, thanks a lot to everybody who's trying to make this happen. It's really good, but it's tough. It's a tough one. I myself struggle a lot with it, to see where we can get our first breakthrough, so to say, even though it's just this small. But and that's why I appreciate that everybody's still hanging in there and trying to make it happen. It's fantastic to see.
Great.
And thanks, Laura, for coordinating everything. You're yeah.
I'm
great to have-
learning so much.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, have a wonderful day, everybody. And evening.
All right, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.